And the number of people laid off by Indian startups since the beginning of the year is now ranging from between 6,000 to 8,000 as per various estimates. This week, online used car marketplace Cars24 became the latest to sack 600 people in one go. They say this is about 6% of their strength, and it's part of the business as usual performance-linked exits that take place every year. While that may very well be the case, it does not take away from a few clear facts. A lot of startups are shedding employees over the last 4 to 5 months, and this includes names like Meesho, Vedantu, etc. Another important number: there have been no new unicorns created in the month of April this year. Are we seeing a slowdown in the space because of funding issues? To talk more on this, let me first go across to my colleague Khushbu, who is explaining what is going on in the space.
We have seen the pressure building up on startups since the onset of March. For example, Better.com has fired over nearly 3,900 employees till now, and Ola has also fired over 2,100 of employees. And similarly, Vedantu has taken off over 425 employees off its payroll. And the same goes for Cars24, which has fired over 600 employees. The edtech startup Unacademy has also taken off over 900 employees off its payroll. And the same trend has been seen on several other startups like Trend, Forlenco, and Meesho. But why is this that so many startups have gone into the firing zone? The first of them is that the VCs and the PE funds have the funds from all these investors have been drying up now, and many investors, due to high interest rates, are finding the US denominated assets more profitable. Apart from this, many businesses have come under lens due to the higher valuations, and during this kind of market, the valuations are being looked upon very vigilantly, and one of the reasons why they have to rethink on their valuations. Many other startups have also been looking forward to get listed, to go public, and for that very reasons they have to trim off their businesses which are not very profitable or not bringing them such kind of revenues, and to trim off that kind of expenses, they've had to go off some businesses which are not bringing them much revenues. This is one of the reasons why many startups have now been facing the pressure of firing employees, and this pressure is being seen that many other startups may face this in the coming days.
All right, Siddharth Pai, founding partner of 314 Capital, is joining us on the show today. I'm speaking with Jang Bahadur Singh, head IT sector of Aon India, and Rituparna Chakraborty, co-founder and executive director of Teamlease, is also with us on the show. Siddharth, let me come to you first with a basic question of why do you think this is happening?
Sure. So one of the main reasons why these companies are actually laying off is because some of the pivots or some of the experiments that they actually ran within the organization haven't actually panned out the way that management actually assumed they actually would. And so hence we actually seen layoffs happening because of that. Two, what we've seen is because of the funding winter that's actually there right now. For a large number of businesses that were completely whose business model could only exist when they were actually getting regular injections of external capital, they've actually been faced with a situation where they need to actually decrease burn. And the decrease in burn has not been only towards employee layoffs itself, but that's been a secular trend across the organization, where salaries are actually cut, any sort of incentives are actually scaled back, any expansions are put on hold, and the last resort actually becomes laying off employees itself. But the one thing that's actually kudos to the startup industry as a whole is that the moment a layoff situation actually ends up happening, more often than not for a number of these startups, the management and the HR come together to actually list down the details of all these particular individuals, make sure they actually end up getting placed in some other organization or not. Now, there exist various informal groups, be it on Signal, be it on WhatsApp, any other messenger platform, wherein that these entrepreneurs actually interact with other entrepreneurs and investors. And they always put it out there saying, these layoffs have actually happened. Here's a Google sheet or here's a roster of all the people being laid off. Here are their contact details. You want to reach out to someone, get additional information. Here's the people you can actually reach out to. So it's become a sort of process that's actually being followed now. And the most important thing to actually look at during this is actually the reabsorption rate. For a number of people actually being laid off as of now, they are actually getting reabsorbed into existing startups itself, as well as other entities for that matter. And as you've seen the layoffs happening in startups, you've actually seen companies, the IT services giants like an Infosys and TCS actually announced they're actually going to do record hires right about now. Even from the banks and other financial institutions, they're actually going out to all the colleges as well as going out to other entities to actually start getting as many people as they can.
No, that's
so rather
great.
than only
that's
concentrating on the layoff situation itself, the reabsorption is something that should also be given its place in the sun, because that shows the resilience and the maturity of the ecosystem, wherein a layoff is not.
Let me come to Ritu and that. Ritu, how do you see this season of layoffs, I mean, I have no way to verify Siddharth's claims that all of these people are getting placed somewhere else through informal channels, etc. But what does it tell you about the ecosystem right now?
Thank you. So actually, it's important to keep things in perspective. Yes, there has been news of certain unfortunate layoffs in the recent times. However, we have to acknowledge that the quantum of those layoffs as against the number of jobs that the ecosystems of the new startups and a lot of innovative ideas, business ideas that we've seen around us is probably not comparable. However, it's a fact that for a single resource who loses his or her job, it is definitely heartbreaking. I think there has been in recent times few layoffs, and from our perspective, I think it's not something that you can broad brush that every organization probably has the same reason for doing it. But at some point or the other, it's important to realize that there are pressures that are expected to come in from investors on account of excessive cash burn. There would be always a pressure to be able to show performance, to be able to deliver to the overall business goals. Mm-hmm. And on account of that, sometimes these layoffs follows. However, it's important to actually focus the way in which these layoffs have happened. Does the provisions of the law allow for such kind of layoffs or retrenchments? Yes. Just like we have been talking about the stories around huge amount of attrition that are happening in different parts in different other sectors where employees are leaving organization high and dry, of course, giving them the necessary notice. It's the same reverse that you're seeing in terms of layoffs. However, I am somebody who's a firm believer that all these layoffs have to be done with a certain sense of dignity. And some of what I've got to know, honestly, I can't factually prove it. Some of the incidents have been a tad upsetting from that perspective. Right. The way in which some of these layoffs have been done.
You know that
otherwise, honestly, we can't wish away.
That really are some of the reports that are coming out that people have been laid off. For example, just on a WhatsApp call, mass messages, not been given due notice, and that is something perhaps which can be improved. But what is the essential reason? Jang Bahadur Singh also with us on the show. Mr. Singh, do you think that there is a paucity of funding? There is a higher demand on accountability perhaps by VCs where they're saying if something's not working out, you can't carry on as business as usual?
Sure. If you look at the Indian startup ecosystem today, a lot of the startups actually depend on VC firms for their funding. Now, what has happened with the interest hikes that Fed has made over the last few months and the inflation that US has been undergoing, and of course other geographies as well, the cost of capital itself is increasing. Startups are not able to get the same valuation that probably they were able to command in 2021. Term sheets are no longer getting signed in a couple of days as they were earlier. And what it has meant is that startups have started having conversations downstream, or rather VC firms have started having conversations downstream with startups, wherein they're pushing a couple of agendas. One is that how do you showcase a path towards profitability? How do you bring down your cost of operations? And second, how do you bring in more corporate governance as well? Now, a lot of these layoffs are directly related to that. And also the other trend is that these layoffs are not secular. If you go by what the Government of India numbers are today, there are almost 65,000 startups registered in the country, employing 6.5 million people. Whereas the number of layoffs that we are talking about are a minuscule amount of that. True. And of course, they're also more heavily towards the e-commerce startups or edtech space, where typically customer acquisition costs also tend to be high. So I think which is where, if you look at these layoffs, we have to take things in context. One is that it is not secular. If you see there are a bunch of B2B startups, SaaS startups that are doing very well. Mm-hmm. Just in the last quarter, there were 12 buybacks that happened, and almost 40% of them were B2B startups. So these layoffs, of course, are being driven by necessary need to look at how you're spending your dollar amount today. And at the same time, it's not secular. The second piece is that the layoffs are also are more more towards jobs which are more in the space of customer service or business operations. None of these layoffs that we've seen have been related to the core teams in these startups. They haven't gone ahead and laid off a lot of their tech folks, unless, of course, for performance issues, which is where I think the story is quite clear. Jobs which are highly likely to get automated, where it's easier to, where the impact on the core end product is lower, or cases where business models themselves are not working. Those are the areas where we are seeing layoffs happen. It's not at this point a story that is secular in nature. We're not seeing this across the board. In terms of what it looks like downstream, I think these are cyclical events, as my co-panelists also spoke about.
Right.
We saw a similar event happen in 16, 17 as well. Most of the industry analysts then looked a couple of quarters down the line, were able to contextualize it as necessary load shedding, and that's what I would also call it in spaces today. Having said that, I think for employees who are getting laid off, there's always it's never a pleasant experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to appreciate the term necessary load shedding. Now, the question is this short-term issue? Can we expect a recovery soon? Mr. Singh makes the point that this is cyclical and even limited to certain sectors. What's your view, Ritu?
I honestly think that it's cyclical, to be honest. These are things that every startups go through these phases. You are seeing some very exciting, absolutely fresh out of the oven startups also who are raising money at this point of time, who are showcasing ambitious plans, who are hiring actively. However, the scenario could be very different for the same organization 1 year, 2 year down the line. So this is essentially a cyclical pattern. I think there is going to be a consolidation. There will be a stabilization, and the very same organization who are currently in the news, you might actually see them coming back and hiring a different set of skill sets. So I am not somebody who is exceptionally pessimistic about what's going on. This too shall pass, and I do feel that this is a passing shower.
No, so now when this too shall pass, and yes, hopefully it will sooner than later, the question is, will it be difficult to retain and hire and regain this kind of talent? Let me come to Jang on that question. How costly will it be for the startups once again, and will people even be keen to look at these jobs knowing that they're not as secure as they may have previously thought?
Sure. So I think, see, why does anyone join a startup today? There are only 2 or 3 fundamental reasons which haven't really changed overnight. One is these are generally individuals who are looking to experience the thrill of scale. The journey that they would do in a startup over a 6-month period probably takes years in a large organization. These are inherently people who want that freedom of expression in their day-to-day work, who like to experiment, change jobs profiles, and so on and so forth, and inherently are risk takers. The second piece is that people also look at startups and join for wealth creation. So any startup that eventually scales by 10x, 100x, similar wealth creation happens for individuals as well. And even if you take a more point in time view of it, if you look at the salaries, even at entry level for some of the unicorns, they are 1x, 2x of the salaries that more established traditional firms offer. So I think point number one, the attractiveness of the startup sector, I think, is not going to go away. It is still very much intact. The Indian talent today understands, and with the successful listing of quite a few IPOs and the buybacks that have now started becoming very, very frequently, there's a maturity that today exists in the sector that a few hiccups along the way are not going to disturb or derail. The second piece is, yes, organizations that are laying off people today, in the future, if they are to hire back the same set of profiles, yes, I think the talent market is more competitive than ever. The salary increases are at record high, and even large organizations such as Microsoft, Amazon, they have spoken about supply side challenges affecting their yearly rates or their growth rates. So I think, yes, the talent challenge remains, but I think, like I said,
right.
The other piece is that some of the layoffs that has been happening are in jobs that are getting automated. So, for example, a lot of the customer service jobs where there are bots coming in, not just chatbots, but also Autobots, who are taking over this space, and hence people, unfortunately, working in this segment are facing the brunt of it. So I think we have to contextualize that, yes, if you are laying off skilled people, by the way, which I haven't seen happen even in the recent layoffs that we've spoken about. But if you do have to lay off or buy some event, you are laying off skilled people, there is a market out there. They will get absorbed very, very quickly. Our employability indexes show
I
that
hope
it
so.
hasn't improved
But
in the
you know,
last
let me
7
look
years.
at this
India as
from
a
the
whole is
company's
still less
point
than
of view. Yeah, I hope people do get absorbed very quickly. Let me look at it from the company's point of view. And Siddharth, let me come to you on this. What are the lessons that startups can take away from the current situation in terms of planning and projection?
I think the primary lesson over here is that capital is not actually a substitute for profits. So I think every single entrepreneur has actually now understood the power of profitability and not having to rely on periodic injections of external capital to actually keep their businesses afloat itself, and to better balance out the aspirations for growth as well as sustainability of an organization. Because the human capital cost of actually hiring a large number of people as well as letting them particularly go, despite the reabsorption rate, is actually going to be quite high. And the reputational risk that actually ends up coming to the organization will actually prevent more quality talent from actually getting hired to that particular organization itself. So there's a very large cost that the organization or the startup ends up paying because of this entire piece. And we've also been seen, especially during the last couple of years, some of the hiring gimmicks in terms of a trip to Dubai, in terms of a bike, in terms of a car, or these kind of crazy things. Anybody can actually tell you that these are inherently not actually sustainable by themselves. And these sort of cheap gimmicks doesn't exactly contribute to building out a sustainable organization, because every startup at the end of the day, once the growth actually ends up tapering out, will actually end up having to turn sustainable and be able to sustain itself on the backs of its own cash flows and its own profits itself. So profitability and bottom line metrics once again come onto the forefront. The human capital cost is something that people have actually internalized now. I think when the ecosystem comes out of this in about 3 quarters, there will actually be a larger degree of maturity that actually ends up coming in, and a greater degree of sustainability that's going to end up being built into the business models itself, which is going to be very important for the entire ecosystem to actually progress and to actually start contributing $1 trillion to India's economy by the year 2025, which is the expectation that the nation actually has of this emerging sector itself.
That's still quite some time. That's another 3 years of possible pain. But in the interim, at least if layoffs have to happen, they should be done, giving dignity to those on the other side of the table. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us in the conversation today on the India Development Debate. We'll take a very short break, but we'll be back with a lot more on the other side. Stay tuned.